Hi, my name is Brandon Gunn. I am the Education Director at Tamarind Institute. I am in charge of all the education of the collaborative printers that come through our program, as well as summer workshops and others that come through to learn about lithography here. Today, I'm going to be just giving a brief introduction to lithography. In the hands of knowledgeable artists and printers, lithography is a powerful tool of creativity. In lithography, unlike many other printmaking processes, a mark true to the artist's hand with little mediation or translation can be preserved. Lithography is able to accommodate an expressive brushstroke just as easily as flat areas of color with crisp edges. Pencil-like marks, brushstrokes, flats, typographic elements, and many other modes of creating imagery can all coexist when the medium is properly used and offer a broad range of aesthetic possibilities. However, lithography is also one of the most complex and difficult print processes. It requires not only the equipment and problem-solving inherent to most of the other print mediums, but also a firm understanding of the chemistry and processes used to reliably preserve the image made by an artist. Like all print mediums, many artists find it too difficult to devote the required time to properly learn the medium and choose to instead rely on the skill and craft of a qualified master printer with whom they collaborate to realize the prints. Though there are many fine examples of the artist printer, there are perhaps even more examples in the collections of every museum that display the relationship of a magnificent artist working in tandem with an equally skilled printer, each playing their part to help create a print that is unique and stands equally alongside an artist's work in other mediums. The underlying principle of lithography is simple: oil and water do not mix. Most materials used in lithography will therefore either play the role of water, which is mostly used to retain non-image areas or whites, or the role of oil or grease, which is used to define the image. Before drawing, a drawing surface must be prepared. Traditionally, this would be a piece of fine limestone quarried in Germany. Through graining, old imagery is removed, allowing stones to easily be reused for decades, some being handed down through generations of printers. The limestone is grained to be perfectly flat and to have a slight tooth to aid in the drawing and printing processes. Once a stone has been grained flat and the old image removed, the artist begins working directly on the stone. An iron oxide sketch may be transferred to the surface to aid in drawing and locating imagery on the surface. Marks to aid in registering the image to the printing paper, and any subsequent runs are also added to the surface. Greasy drawing materials such as specialized crayons, pencils, and touche are the main drawing tools used in lithography, though there are numerous variations of these and many creative ways to use them. Like lead pencils, lithographic pencils and crayons come in different hardnesses and shapes, allowing an artist to create different types of lines and marks. Lithographic touche is a liquid medium that, after being painted onto the surface, begins to reticulate, like coffee rings, as it dries, creating a unique pattern or shape. Over the years, as artists and printers have worked together, the traditional materials of lithography have been expanded and adapted to meet the unique image-making needs of artists. Modern lithography can accommodate many different methods of applying grease, but has also expanded to incorporate less traditional materials, including photographic capabilities. Once an artist has finished creating their image, the printer must etch the image into the surface of the stone. They begin by dusting the drawing with rosin to help prevent the acids in the etch from eating away delicate imagery, and then talc to help draw the water-based etch right up next to the greasy drawing material. Acid is then mixed into a material called gum arabic, with the amount of acid used correlating to how greasy the drawing is. Greasier passages of drawing require more acid to properly etch the drawing, helping it retain the original character of the artist's drawing throughout the printing process. Unlike intaglio, woodcut, or silkscreen, lithography is not etched into relief or incised into the surface. Indeed, there is no physical change to the surface level of the stone. Etching in lithography refers instead to the chemical change enacted through grease, acids, gum arabic, and the lime in the limestone to define areas that attract oil or grease, called oleophilic, and areas that attract water, called hydrophilic. As grease and water repel each other, this is all that is needed to define the imagery for printing. The printer uses different mixtures of gum arabic and acid, or etch, as well as time and quantity of etch to properly treat each area of the image, and finishes by buffing a fresh layer of pure gum arabic onto the surface with cheesecloth. The stone must now sit for a short period of time so that the fatty acids in the greasy drying material can react with the alkaline limestone to create a form of insoluble soap under the surface of the stone. This ghost, as it is called, then becomes the basis for the image, later attracting the oily printing ink. The gum arabic bonds to the stone in the non-image areas, and even when washed off later, serves to attract water to the non-image areas of the stone. After an appropriate amount of time, the printer removes the greasy materials that were used to make the drawing, washing them from the surface using a solvent that will not disturb the layer of gum arabic that also now resides on the stone. Once the drawing material has been removed, the chemical ghost formed through the etching is visible, holding the image areas in place. Asphaltum is buffed into the surface to help further attract ink, the non-image area still being protected by a layer of buffed-in gum arabic. Water is then applied to the surface to remove the excess gum arabic, but leaving the asphaltum and ghost untouched. Using a sponge, the water is smoothed to a thin film, and a roller covered in oily ink is passed over the surface numerous times to begin depositing ink in the image areas. With water protecting the non-image areas, the oily ink only sticks to the image areas. Sponging and rolling is repeated until the image is fully inked. The stone is then fanned dry, and once again rosin and talc are applied to the image, now covered in ink instead of the original drawing materials. The etching process is repeated, reinforcing the chemistry of image and non-image areas, and preparing them for the stress of printing, and then the stone is allowed to rest. Once the image is established in the stone, the printer and artist work together to determine the color the image will be printed in, as well as what paper to print on. If more runs and colors are part of the image, they are drawn and etched on separate stones or plates similar to the first, with identical registration marks scratched into the surface to align the imagery and paper in the final print. Before printing an edition, the image is proofed. This process is essential in the development of the imagery, allowing the artist to see the separate drawings and colors come together in the final print, and to make necessary adjustments. This may include changing the colors, but also often includes changing the drawing on various stones or plates to achieve the artist's vision. The printer mixes inks for each run, adjusting them as necessary to suit the needs of the imagery. An archival cotton rag paper is torn to the appropriate size and marked with registration lines to aid in placing it in the proper location on the stone. Printing involves waking up the stone by washing out the black ink and replacing it with the chosen color, much like before. Alternating between sponging and rolling, the image is fully inked. The printing paper is aligned to the registration marks, then covered by a protective newsprint. A tympan lubricated with grease is placed on top and then run through the lithographic press under pressure. Through printing, the ink on the stone is transferred to the surface of the paper, where it will eventually absorb into the surface, creating a beautiful, thin film of ink unique to lithography. In proofing, each run is printed, and the artist and printer work together to make the necessary adjustments, repeating the proofing process over and over until they are happy with the final image produced. Once a successful proof has been pulled, it is signed by the artist as the approval to print, usually designated with BAT or TP1 at Tamarind on the print. A proofing session may result in multiple trial proofs or color trial proofs, but only one approval to print. With the approval to print as a guide and copious notes, the printer is then able to later return to the project, mixing more ink and preparing paper for the entire agreed upon edition. The process of sponging, inking, and printing is repeated for each sheet in the edition, one stone or plate at a time. A 10-run print would require 10 stones or plates, each likely requiring a day to print. Unlike intaglio, lithographs are printed one run at a time, stacking the ink films until the image is complete. Once the edition has been printed and allowed to dry, it is taken to a clean area for curating. Here the good prints are set aside, and prints with mistakes or inconsistencies are destroyed. An edition of print should all be identical to each other, and the edition identical to the approval to print. There should be no discernible difference between the first print in an edition and the last. Indeed, the number assigned to a print has no relation to the order in which the prints were pulled or their quality, but simply identified as a unique part of a limited number of prints produced. Once the curator has ensured the quality of the edition and fixed any small mistakes, they then prepare the prints for signing by the artist. The workshop and printer's chop, an identifying embossment or stamp, is added as appropriate, as well as an identifying number. When ready, the artist signs each print individually, and the edition is then complete.